From the KSL Broadcast House, this is Sunday Edition with Doug Wright.
Thank you for joining us on Sunday Edition, and we're coming to you from my home in Holiday, Utah today. Well, the moratorium on evictions for renters is coming to an end. So what will some of the options be? What kind of help can renters receive? We'll be talking about that later on in the program. Republicans all of a sudden are getting very focused on climate change, and in no small part because of our 3rd District Congressman, John Curtis, who also will join us. And of course, we also want to talk about fireworks. That's on everybody's mind right now. With the extreme drought we have in the state of Utah, not just in the state, but throughout the Intermountain West, what exactly is going to unfold and what are the rules? It seems to be a little confusing, so we called Senator Todd Weiler and we had a little chat with him. I'd like to share that with you now on Sunday Edition. Senator, we thought on Sunday Edition that this would be a real good time to clarify what indeed is happening in the state of Utah when it comes to the use of fireworks. You and I were just discussing this prior to going on the air, that some rather progressive legislation, let's put it that way, was passed in around 2013 that really opened the floodgates that I'd never seen in my lifetime for the use of fireworks. And then in 2018, things were modified a little bit. Representative Jim Dunnigan is the one that worked on both of those pieces of legislation. So what does the law actually say, and why are we sensing a little confusion on what public officials can do in the state?
Yeah, Doug, and thanks for the question. As you know, Utah's desert dry conditions have always made our state susceptible to wildfires. So in 2018, Representative Dunnigan partnered with Senator Janie Iwamoto, who's a Democrat, and they worked with the Utah League of Cities and Towns and other stakeholders to come up with our current statutory construction. And they passed House Bill 38 that year. And what they did was they gave local city councils, and town councils, the authority to restrict fireworks in those sensitive areas where there's a high risk of, like starting a forest fire. So for instance, I live in a tract subdivision. If a fire started in my yard, I could probably put it out with my foot. And if I couldn't, I could certainly put it out with a garden hose. But if I live next to a canyon and a fire started, we could be looking at a $40,000 acre fire. And so I think we all recognize there's a difference between those two scenarios.
When the governor says that he doesn't have the authority to ban fireworks statewide, but the local communities, as you've alluded to, do, should the governor have that authority?
I think that's a great question. So the governor did declare a state of emergency on the drought on March 17th, 2021, and that would expire in 30 days unless the legislature extended it. The legislature extended that through October last May. We also had Governor Herbert declare a state of emergency on a drought in the fall of 2018. So this is the second drought declaration, state of emergency, in the last 5 years. And by the way, that's a magic number because there's been 2 droughts in the last 5 years. That gives the cities pretty much carte blanche authority to start drawing maps and restricting areas. So that keys some statutory language for environmentally hazardous areas. But yeah, I mean, I think we could debate as a matter of policy whether the governor should be able to do a statewide ban. Currently, our law doesn't allow that. And let me just say, I think that makes sense because if you and I owned property on Bear Lake and we're shooting fireworks over Bear Lake, that's different maybe than someone in St. George shooting them over a canyon, right? And so the governor does, the state fire marshal, who's executive branch of the governor, they do have the authority to restrict fireworks on state-owned land. And they've done that has been done. So that's where the governor's authority ends. But where the cities and towns authority begins is for any property that's in a city or town, the city councils have that authority. And a caveat there is the unincorporated pockets of counties, and there the state fire marshal has some authority as well. But in any event, the governor has already restricted, under the current legal scheme, the governor has already restricted all of the fireworks on the state-owned land that he has authority over.
Mayor Mendenhall of Salt Lake City, of course, said, quote, essentially the city is combustible. Now, some of the fireworks will go on. As I understand, Jordan Park will go on for July 4th, and then also the Pioneer Day celebration that has been traditional as long as I can remember in Liberty Park will go on. Are extraordinary measures being taken? I know this would be a better question for the mayor herself, but around the state, are you convinced, as one of our state leaders, state legislators, that enough is being done to really make sure that even where everything, as the mayor said, in the city is combustible, are we doing enough?
Yeah, I think time will tell. I mean, I think Utahns are fairly responsible with their fireworks, but we all know that guy down the street who's kind of an idiot.
He lives right down here, by the way. Yeah.
I mean, we all know. I mean, I can ask anyone in any neighborhood. They all know. They all can tell you the guy. And so hopefully, I mean, will we have a few fires started with fireworks over the next 5 weeks? Probably. Hopefully they'll be contained. But I think that's all a balancing act, because if it was the proper role of government to reduce all risk for everyone, we wouldn't let anyone drive, right? I mean, and most people cheered when we raised our speed limits to 80 miles an hour. But if it was the government's role to protect everyone from any possible injury, all of our speed limits would be like 20 miles an hour if we did let people drive. And so I think the question for policymakers is always, where do you draw that line? And I think it's perfectly reasonable for some people to say, we don't like where the legislature has drawn it, we should draw it somewhere else. That's a great policy discussion. But what I do know is there's not going to be a special session in the next week. And so any new prohibitions are going to have to be taken by the city councils and their mayors.
Do you anticipate any modifications in light of the two droughts? And unfortunately, as you try to read the tea leaves and look into the crystal ball, we're not seeing that we're going to become a tropical paradise before too long. Do you anticipate that any changes will or should be made?
I think there's been enough attention to this issue that it wouldn't surprise me if there's some bills to make some tweaks. And I think some tweaks would be in order, because one thing that's been clear to me, and by the way, I know the citizenry is frustrated, because what they see is their mayor and city councils pointing at the state legislature, and then people like me are pointing back at the mayor and city councils. And we shouldn't let our citizens get caught. So shame on us. So I do think that a lot of city council members are scrambling to find out what exactly their authority is. And I think there's been some misinformation and some confusion that's been given to city council members. So good for us that we're all going to learn a little bit more about the law. But whenever you have this powerful of a spotlight shut on a piece of legislation, usually there's some tweaks that can be made. And I've seen some tweaks that I'd like to be made, but I don't know, what the political will be next, because these things tend to fizzle out. So if there's a lot of interest in July, maybe next February, there's not as much interest. And we saw that, quite frankly, with the riots and the BLM protests. By the time we got around to the session, a lot of that, public clamor had quieted.
There does seem to be a little confusion at the local level, whereas you have indicated the power truly is.
Yeah.
What can we do to clarify that? Is it just a matter of us all stepping up?
Having hundreds of angry people calling City Hall every day is probably helping to clarify that, because everybody's now reading the code. But, I've been on a city council, a small city in Woods Cross. That's a part-time job. When I was there, I got paid $300 a month. So it's not a full-time job where you focus on everything. That's why we rely on city managers and things like that to kind of keep us abreast. But, looking at this code, I think it could be more clear. There was a May 1st deadline that I think a lot of city council members thought, well, shoot, because we didn't meet the May 1st deadline, now we can't do anything, which is not how I read it. But I think that some clarifications should be made next year. Yeah.
Senator, I appreciate you joining us on the program. It's been far too long since we've chatted. I wish you well and have a great 4th of July and 24th of July. Coming up next on Sunday Edition, we're going to talk with Representative John Curtis, a Republican from the great state of Utah, who is leading the charge on having Republicans get very serious about climate change. This week, Congressman John Curtis, 3rd Congressional District here in the state of Utah, talked with us about the need for Republicans to catch up, basically, and really focus in on climate change. We'd like to share our conversation with John Curtis with you now. Congressman, you've got to tell us exactly what is the Conservative Climate Caucus and how did it come about?
Yeah, Doug, I am so excited. The Conservative Climate Caucus is a place for Republicans to come talk about the climate without having to check their conservative principles at the door. And what's so exciting about it is there is so much for us to talk about. And it breaks my heart that we've allowed ourselves to be branded as not caring about the environment. And I'm hopeful this will show people that we really do.
That branding has always distressed me.
Yeah.
Recently, for example, Speaker of the House here in the state of Utah, Brad Wilson, for Envision Utah, I moderated a really interesting discussion. Climate change, of course, came up. And he said, hey, look, I've lived in Utah my whole life, and how can I put it more simply than this? I am watching the climate, the weather change. I remember when Mitt Romney, when he said, I believe in climate change, and I believe that human beings have a role in it. Oh my goodness. It was, a lot of people just gasped. And that wasn't that long ago when he had the guts to say that.
No, but you know what, Doug, I think part of the problem is for right or wrong, Republicans feel like so much is packaged into that. The agenda of the Green New Deal. There's a sense that if you accept that, you have to accept the Green New Deal and all of these things. And that's not true, but I think that's the way it feels to a lot of Republicans, which I think adds to their hesitancy to go down that path.
Let's talk for a moment about the caucus itself. How many members, where do they come from, and what do you hope, maybe 2-3 years from now, as we're ironically getting ready for another major election in the United States of America, what do you hope the caucus may have facilitated or helped to make come about?
So I'm so excited. There are 63 members of the caucus that jumped from just 50 the day before, from 40 the day before, from 30 the day before. This thing is growing. It's just incredibly well received here in Washington, D.C. I'm really excited about that. And my hope, Doug, is that I think the way we would measure success is if in 2 or 3 years, every single Republican can stand up in a town hall meeting and say, of course, the climate's changing. Let me tell you what I'm doing about it. We haven't been doing that. And that I think is a mistake.
I think there's such an interesting discussion that needs to be had, has to be had, but it can reasonably be had because, as you mentioned, there are those who are extreme on the left who believe that unless you're on board with everything you just talked about, everything green, and it has to happen right here, right now. I think as Republicans, there needs to be some responsibility taken for those who still will look you straight in the eye and say this is a hoax, it isn't happening, and this is all designed. Even the conversation, reasonable conversation, is simply designed to further the liberal agenda.
Yeah, I hear it all the time. And I think my response is, can you join me on this? We have a responsibility to be good stewards of this earth. We must leave it better than we found it. Can you join me on that? Of course they can. That gives us a starting point, if that makes sense. And I think, I've never met a single Utahn that won't join me at that level.
There's a term in the article several articles that I've read that talks about it's going to take American innovation to really make this happen. And somebody, I believe, who's on the caucus said something to the effect, instead of exporting American jobs due to climate, we should be exporting American innovation. That's the way we have always done it.
So true. And I can give you a couple real quick examples. I just had a major car manufacturer in my office. They're going to be all electric in just over a dozen years. We want to export those cars overseas. We don't want to import EVs from China into the United States. We know that China is putting out vast amounts of carbon. We can develop direct air capture. We can develop the technology to pull that carbon out of the air. We have to do things like that if we're ultimately going to be successful, and the United States can lead in that.
The United States leadership, I think, is such an important topic here because I hear some people salve our wounds and some of our criticism that we get as Americans with, hey, 85% of the greenhouse gases come from outside the USA. The other thing that could be said is we create 15% of the world's greenhouse gases and have 4% of its population. I think we need to get beyond these petty, stupid arguments.
So I think, Doug, there's another thing that factors in, which is unfortunate, which is what I call a culture of shaming. And that is, no matter how hard you try, no matter what you do, it's never enough, to the extremist on climate. And we've got to start celebrating some of our successes. So while those numbers are true, at the same time, the US has reduced more greenhouse gas emissions during the last decade than every other country trying to reduce them combined. It's not enough, I'll be the first to tell you that, but let's stop for a moment and say good job, right? Pat ourselves on the back. And I think what happens when we don't is we turn people off, right? It's like, well, why even try? Because I can never satisfy you. I think we need to celebrate the neighbor that walks to church, the neighbor that changes their LED to LED bulbs, the neighbor that doesn't idle, all of those small things. I don't think we stop enough to really celebrate. And when we celebrate, we engage people and get them excited to do more.
John, what a great conversation. Thank you so much. I wish you well with the caucus, and we'll have to check in again on this and see how much progress is being made.
Please do, Doug. Good to talk with you.
Coming up next, we're going to focus in on those who are struggling paying their rent and the end of the moratorium on eviction. That's coming up in our next segment. The moratorium on evictions has been extended for about another month, but as we understand it, that will be the final extension. So it's leaving a lot of people who are still struggling with paying rent, what the options might be. Well, we thought we would check in with Christina Oliver, who is joining us now from the Department of Workforce Services here in the state of Utah. Christina, welcome to Sunday Edition. And did we get that right? Tell us what the actual rules, the parameters are for the moratorium as we speak.
Well, the moratorium on evictions does expire, as you stated, on the 30th, and we anticipate there are approximately 16,000 homes in the state of Utah that could potentially face eviction. Currently, we do not have access to the Emergency Mortgage Assistance Fund, but we do still have access to the Rental Affordable Fund that provides 3 months of assistance to individuals who are facing eviction in apartments.
I understand that there is a considerable sum that ultimately will be available and is available now to help people. How much money do we have in the kitty somewhere?
Statewide, we received an allocation of $215 million. As of today, the state has processed approximately 7,600 applications, and we've allocated out approximately $23 million. So there's a significant amount of money left over. We encourage everyone who is eligible. It does have some income eligible constraints, but to come out and apply and see if this could possibly be a resource for them.
In much of the information that I have perused and read, it has indicated, at least my impression is, you don't want to wait on this. You don't want to wait until you're sitting at the kitchen table looking at the eviction notice. You should be acting now. Is that correct, and how do we do that?
That is correct. You need to visit rentrelief.utah.gov, or you can call 211 and get assistance. The application process is not difficult. It is a quick turnaround, and we don't want people to wait until they have the eviction notice sitting on their kitchen table. We want folks to proactively apply, provide us limited documentation so we can get those funds out the door and help them secure their house.
If you do have an eviction notice sitting on the table at some time in the future, because the moratorium is still in effect, what would you do? And is that just flat too late?
It is not too late. It is absolutely never too late to let us help you secure your home. So again, calling 211 and going on rentrelief.utah.gov, follow the application process, ensure that you are submitting a complete application with all of the requested documentation, and it will get processed in a timely manner. We also work with landlords. So it's not just tenants. If tenants are working with their landlords, they are welcome to fill out the application together. Some landlords are proactively filling out applications for some of their tenants who may not have the means to fill them out themselves.
Christina, as I have read the numbers, read the stories, Do we have hotbeds? Are there areas of the state where you are dealing with many more people who need assistance than others? I would assume that is the case, but where are the hotbeds?
You know, it is geographically dispersed. It really is more on the income basis. So we have 80% AMI individuals throughout the state, and those are the individuals that are the households that are likely to utilize this program if their household income has been impacted by COVID, which most people's have.
Yeah, yeah. For someone who is concerned, and they realize that the extended moratorium may not completely cover them in the situation that they are in, what should they do? Where do they start? Is there a website? Is there a number? What should they do?
It would be rentrelief.utah.gov, and that is run through the Department of Workforce Services. Currently, we only have the rental assistance available, but we have made application to the federal government to utilize a $66 million allocation to the state of Utah for mortgage assistance help. So that is forthcoming. We do have a plan and process that we have to go through with the federal government in order to start to be able to expend those funds. But we have access and allocation to help families on both sides of the spectrum, whether you're a homeowner or a renter. So again, 211 and rentrelief.utah.gov. And we welcome any questions that anybody may have. 211 is the best resource to call to get immediate assistance.
Christina, we really appreciate you joining us on Sunday Edition. Just a real quick question. Do you anticipate a lot of people running into problems on the 30th of July?
Unfortunately, we do think that there will be an onslaught of foreclosures. Unfortunately, not everybody has been able to make up the income that they lost during the pandemic. So while unfortunate, we do have resources to assist, and the governor has allowed our department to move forward with that application process. It is extremely important to keep people in their homes, and any way we can help, we are willing to do it. We also have resources for food and utilities. That includes heating and cooling. Internet is a utility that is now a qualified expense. Gas, electric, and water. So we have a broad portfolio of resources available. We just need help getting the word out. Sometimes individuals and families feel that applying for these resources is not something that they want to do, but it's not the time to refuse services that could help you. They're there to help, so let us help you.
Christina, thank you for joining us on Sunday Edition. And music and the spoken word, that's coming up next.